All right. Good morning, everyone. We are just about to get started with this morning's news conference. For those who don't know me, my name is Josh Hovey. I'm a partner at Bellwether Public Relations, and we are facilitating this event today. As you all know, data centers or data centers, depending on how you want to pronounce them, are a hot topic in the news. There's a lot of activity in Michigan, a lot of discussion about projects around the state, and a lot of misinformation. And this coalition is coming together to help become a resource for the local decision makers. And to talk about that and kick things off, I'm going to turn things over to Jim Holcomb with the Michigan Chamber.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jim Holcomb. I'm President and CEO of the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. We're a statewide business organization representing businesses of all sizes, industries across Michigan's 83 counties in our state. Today, I'm pleased to be here with other organizations to announce the launch of Michigan for Responsible Data Centers. This is a cross-sector coalition focused on a clear goal, ensuring Michigan communities and decision makers have access to accurate, fact-based information about data centers and their impact on local communities. We're striving to bring together a wide array of industry associations, utilities, infrastructure, research universities, and subject matter experts, including local leaders, to help inform this conversation. This effort is grounded in one simple idea. Communities deserve a fact-based information so they can make informed decisions about the projects that may shape their local economies for decades. Across Michigan and the entire country, data center proposals are raising important questions around energy usage, water, land, the long-term value of proposed data centers. These are important questions, and it's more than fair that these questions are being asked. But too often, the conversation, unfortunately, is shaped by incomplete or misleading information, and that just gets amplified online. And that's where this coalition, we hope, comes in. We're focused on elevating facts, bringing forward independent research, and credible expertise. Resources like the University of Michigan's Graham Sustainability Institute Guidebook. This is a fact-based insight guidebook. It talks about best practices around energy, water, environmental, and economic considerations. And I think a lot of people would be kind of surprised to hear that one of the key findings so far in the research is that in communities with increased electric load from large facilities, such as maybe a data center, overall energy rates can actually go down because of improved system utilization. What we see, in other words, is responsible growth can strengthen the electric grid and actually benefit residential customers and possibly, and we hope, reduce costs. At the same time, we know we need more Michigan-specific data. We need more Michigan-specific information. And that's also why the Michigan Chamber Foundation, along with the Detroit Chamber of Commerce, we're working to collaborate with public sector consultants to compile a Michigan-specific independent analysis of data center investment, looking at factors such as economic impact, infrastructure demands, evaluating workforce needs, environmental, energy, and community considerations. With independent studies and engaging subject matter experts, this coalition can bring more clarity and context to this important conversation. We want communities to be able to evaluate opportunities based on data and not online noise. At the Michigan Chamber, we've long advocated for strong, modern infrastructure. And traditionally, you would think that meaning roads, bridges, airports, electric grid, water, sewer, and those remain absolutely essential. But simply put, in today's economy, digital infrastructure is just as critical. Just like quality broadband connections, data centers are part of the backbone that powers modern commerce. From healthcare systems to advanced manufacturing, financial services, and emerging technologies. When responsibly planned and integrated into local infrastructure and energy systems, data centers can support innovation, strengthen reliability, and help position Michigan as a destination for advanced industries. But how data centers are developed really does matter. We know these projects are raising questions and concerns, and that's why this coalition exists and why the Michigan Chamber and others are part of it. It's imperative that communities have verified information they need to thoroughly evaluate the projects that are being proposed. And if Michigan gets this right, Pairing strong infrastructure with transparent, responsible development, Michigan can lead in the digital economy while giving communities the confidence in the decisions that lie ahead. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Jarls with NTH Consultants.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today at this important event. As Jim mentioned, my name is Jeff Jarris, and I am President and CEO of NTH Consultants. We are a Michigan-based environmental and infrastructure engineering firm, and for 60 years, we've assisted our clients with developing sustainable infrastructure projects and environmental compliance strategies that meet strict federal and state environmental regulations to assure that the communities in which our clients operate within and our colleagues live in continue to thrive. At NTH, our mission is simple: do work that has a meaningful, positive impact. That's why I am proud to be part of the launch of Michigan for Responsible Data Centers, a coalition focused on making sure that we approach this opportunity thoughtfully, transparently, and the right way from the start. That is responsibility. Across Michigan and the country, data centers are getting a lot of attention. This state's pure Michigan identity, our proximity to the Great Lakes, our natural resources, and our long-standing environmental ethic deserve protection. The last thing anyone in this coalition wants is to tarnish this reputation. But here's what's important to understand. We are not starting from scratch. We already have a strong, well-established environmental framework, and the real opportunity is applying it thoughtfully to this next generation of development. My perspective comes from over 30 years assisting public and private clients across various industries with environmental compliance and permitting. Early in my career, I spent nearly a decade working as a regulator at the state level. And for the last 20 plus years, I have worked as an environmental engineering consultant to clients in varied industries and across the country. While I am not an operator of data centers, I have seen firsthand how complex facilities are evaluated, permitted, and held accountable. People have real questions, and the public's concern tend to focus on water use, energy demand, noise, and land use. What's important is that each of these areas are already governed by existing federal, state, and local regulations designed to protect public health and the environment. Take water use, for example. Today's data centers increasingly use closed-loop cooling systems that significantly reduce water consumption, often by as much as 70%, and limit discharge of wastewater. Michigan policy is reinforcing the use of these systems through tax incentives tied to responsible design, along with local oversight through municipal systems. Noise is another concern, and again, this is an area with well-established engineering solutions. Through site design, equipment placement, and proven mitigation strategies like acoustic barriers, we can address these impacts in a predictable and measurable way. I am not an expert on energy use or energy regulation, and would defer to my colleagues regarding this topic. However, I can say that on the energy side, Michigan Public Service Commission rules ensure that large users pay for the infrastructure needed to support them. This assures that data centers do not shift costs and protect existing customers. Michigan has a real opportunity here to support economic growth while continuing to protect our natural resources. Whether we are talking about a data center, a manufacturing facility, or a power plant, Michigan and US EPA already have a mature, effective, and enforceable environmental regulatory system, and it works. These laws have been improved over decades, and Michigan is widely recognized as a national leader in environmental protection. The bottom line is this: we should absolutely expect responsible development, but we should also recognize that we have the tools to enforce it. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this conversation. I believe conversations like this are exactly how we get this right. I will now pass it over to my colleague Craig Wright with Michigan State Utility Workers Union.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Craig Wright, President of the Michigan State Utility Workers Council. We represent the skilled trades people who provide electricity and gas to Michigan communities. I'm so proud to take part in this coalition launch today because data centers are not just a policy conversation. They are also a workforce conversation, and it's so important that Michigan workers have a seat at the table. As previous speakers have stated, data centers represent one of the most significant infrastructure investments coming to the state, and when done correctly, will be a huge opportunity for Michigan's skilled trades. A single large-scale facility can represent hundreds of millions of dollars in construction investment, which equates to a large amount of work opportunity for skilled labor. And we're talking about good, meaningful employment across the trades: iron workers, laborers, electricians, pipe fitters, HVAC, and telecommunications, just to name a few. And these are not minimum wage jobs. These are union scale jobs with benefits, jobs that support local families and the communities that they live in. One aspect that I do want to mention that often gets overlooked is that many of these job opportunities remain long after the final construction is completed. A single large facility typically employs dozens of full-time operations and maintenance technicians. These are good paying technical positions that can provide a career opportunity for a lot of workers. Another reason that reasonable data center development matters is that it can strengthen Michigan's skilled labor apprenticeship pipeline, which is needed for job growth opportunities and for young men and women in our communities, and it is extremely important to the trades. When developers commit to labor agreements, project labor agreements, and local hiring provisions, they are investing in the training and certification programs that will build the next generation of Michigan skilled tradespeople. And those type of career opportunities are so critical for our local economies. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this important issue. And now to speak about the broader economic impact of data centers, I will introduce Randy Thalen with The Right Place.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. My name is Randy Thalen. I'm the president and CEO of The Right Place. And if you're not familiar, we're the leading economic development organization for Greater Grand Rapids. We've been operating now for 40 years and have helped deliver over 50,000 jobs to our region. I'm here today because data centers can have a profoundly positive impact on a region, and the concerns that are being raised by the public can be imminently addressed. About 10 years ago in my career, I worked in Omaha, Nebraska, and helped recruit 2 hyperscale data centers to that community, and was able to witness firsthand the comments and the impact that Craig just identified. And over time, see how those impacts have continued to transform those communities in positive ways. Millage rates that have been reduced 9 years in a row, new schools that have been built, new community centers built, new infrastructure built, and reduced electric rates as well. So I've seen it firsthand. And whereas data centers may seem new to Michigan, they're hardly new to this country. There's 4,000 across the country, roughly 70 in Michigan, and the industry has now discovered Michigan, and we've got to find a way to do it in a responsible way. And as the other speakers have noted, there are plenty of positive benefits that can accrue from a data center, but only if we address the concerns raised by the community. And thankfully here in Michigan, we have several ways to do that. Jim mentioned earlier, the University of Michigan published through their Graham Sustainability Institute, the Data Center Guidebook. This is a resource that every local government leader should have at their fingertips and use on a daily basis as they contemplate how best to consider putting data centers into the context of their community. As the guidebook notes, and we've experienced firsthand here in Greater Grand Rapids, Michigan communities have several possible approaches to accomplish these goals, welcoming the benefits of data centers while addressing the concerns. And the concerns can be addressed in several very specific ways. We're seeing communities across Michigan update their zoning ordinance. Frankly, data centers were not contemplated in the zoning ordinances of many communities. It just wasn't part of the lexicon of zoning back in the day when those ordinances were developed. So now they're going back in, updating their ordinances to consider how best to address the data center opportunity. Those communities, though, that have projects in front of them most often are looking at 2 other ways to address that, either through special use permits or rezoning with conditions, 2 additional tools for communities to use to really make sure, how do you prescribe these projects in a way that fits within the context of the surrounding community and addresses some of the concerns that my colleague Jeff referenced earlier: building setbacks, noise and light pollution standards, infrastructure usage, even the timing of when backup generators can be used all can be addressed through a special use permit or rezoning with conditions. Beyond the zoning tools that we have at our fingertips, communities could also deploy development agreements. These further outline the community benefits that can be accrued and commit to writing contractually these companies to detail the job creation and the wage levels, detail the investment that will accrue, the property taxes that will accrue, even how they'll go about sourcing that talent and searching for those new hires in their communities. So between the zoning ordinances, special use permits, rezoning with conditions, and development agreements, the communities that we're working with through this coalition, they have the toolkit across the state to address the concerns that were raised by the community. Beyond zoning, we also have to recognize that there's a great deal of misunderstanding around data centers. Even though all of us in business and personally use data centers on a daily basis, there continues to be confusion over what they are, what they do, how they operate, and how they'll function in communities. The companies behind these data centers must own that education process. They must reach further into the community, beyond the public hearing process and beyond the township board meetings, and go hold town hall meetings, open houses, and really help educate and build the trust within the communities. And we're seeing that happen today. In our region, just recently, Microsoft held 2 open houses that attracted hundreds of people, answered their questions in a very thoughtful format so that people could leave that with a better understanding of what the opportunity is and how they're working to address those challenges. We'll be working with this coalition to ensure that these and other best practices are promoted throughout Michigan communities and considering whether or not to allow a data center development going forward. Look forward to working with the coalition, and I also look forward to working with Tyler Thiel with the Anderson Economic Group, who will follow me next.
Thanks so much, Randy. The classic need to unmute myself before I start speaking. I'm so glad to be here today. I am Tyler Thiel, Chief Operating Officer at Anderson Economic Group. I also serve as the Director of our Public Policy and Economic Analysis Practice Area. We've had the privilege of conducting over 200 economic impact analyses over the years, and one of our more recent ones is related to data centers. We were commissioned to conduct independent, credible economic and fiscal impact analysis so we can try to have detailed data out there for you to inform public discourse on this and educate everyone on what data centers mean, what the opportunity is for economic development here in Michigan. Our analysis modeled 3 hypothetical scenarios, so we got to really work as a team and come up with realistic scenarios for size in Michigan. We based those on power capacity, liquid cooled, types of hiring, long-term construction and operations, and then long-term facility and operations in your municipality. So this is very Michigan-specific data that we worked on. We relied on only publicly available data so that we're not disclosing any developer or proposed plan. We applied our standard economic impact methodology, our rigorous method that we apply to many projects throughout the state to get at output earnings and employment numbers that you can all stand on with 2 feet. They're conservative, they're rigorous, they're careful, and they're very likely to be outcomes that you would see for successful data center development in Michigan. When we conduct this type of analysis, we carefully look at each dollar invested and how that dollar will circulate through the Michigan economy through the construction period and through the operations period to get at net new economic impact, direct, and then indirect as well. So when we examine the construction period, we're looking at really significant upfront investment. These are developers saying like, hi, can we deposit some money in your state? So depending on facility scale, construction spending and timeline, we estimated that between 121 million and 5.5 billion in total new economic output can be generated in Michigan just during the build phase. That activity can support over 800 to up to 30,000 jobs. We're looking at 20 megawatt to 1 gigawatt sized facilities. So that's why there's such a range. And this is direct and indirect employment. So these impacts not only include the on-site construction jobs, but all of the supply chain activities and the other jobs that would be likely to be supported in Michigan, given our current labor market and workforce availability, given our current economy, given vendor supply locale here in our state versus purchases that would likely have to be made outside of the states to support the construction of these facilities. Then we look at long-term operations projected 20 to 40 years because we want good neighbors in these possible developments. We want folks that are planning to be here for decades in our communities. And so depending on that size and longevity, we estimate that between 624 million to 5.5 billion in net new economic output over operational life is what we would see as net new dollars in Michigan that are not likely to otherwise be moving through our economy. So these impacts reflect ongoing employment, vendor contracts, maintenance, utilities, professional services, and induced spending in the local economy. We're also very careful to consider substitution and leakage. So as I briefly touched on, we don't assume that every single employee at a new facility that says they'll be hiring 100 full-time is a brand new hire to Michigan. We understand that a certain portion is net new. We understand that a certain portion is substitution, right? Because we have highly skilled people here who may be unemployed or underemployed who would love the opportunity to finish their career at a data center and know that they have that long-term reliable employment. So importantly, the operational impacts often exceed construction impacts over time because the facilities are long-term assets. Our modeling assumes that projects approved in Michigan will operate up to the years we're showing. The economic benefits, as I've touched on, they compound over time when these projects remain stable and well-managed and integrated into the local economy. When you're thinking about indirect impacts, I know some of the numbers I mentioned can be really big, but think about it as a small business. Small businesses will really drive our local economy. One small data center with 25 full-time employees, say 12 of them are net new, and every Wednesday they do pastry day in the office like we do at AEG. That's the donut shop down the street that's now got the opportunity to hire 2 more full-time employees to support the demand. And so there'll be dozens of opportunities like that around Michigan for every one successful data center that we can retain. The range really reflects project size, but in each scenario, I think you'll see that the potential economic footprint is really substantial. So my goal is to provide really clear fact-based analysis so that decision makers can make good decisions on this opportunity that we have. Economic opportunity is so important in Michigan right now. The net new economic impact from one large data center is equivalent to hosting 2 Detroit Lions playoffs games every year. Last year, this most recent season, we didn't get to host one. The season before, we did. These opportunities are like 2 guaranteed. I think we'd all love to have that. And then one last point I'll leave you with. Michigan is already a hub for so many great sectors: automotive manufacturing, our medical talent pipeline, our insurance services. These industries are becoming more and more innovative and high-tech based, and we need to provide the proper infrastructure support for them to thrive in Michigan's economy of tomorrow and to move forward. So with that, thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to Jim.
Great. Thank you very much, Tyler. Thanks to all of our coalition speakers, to all the media for joining today. We truly appreciate you being here. And I think today's conversation really just reinforces an important point. Data centers are not just technology facilities. They're a long-term infrastructure investment in Michigan's economic future. But it's really important how they are developed. At the Michigan Chamber, we believe growth and responsibility go hand in hand. Projects must be thoughtfully planned. Energy demand needs to be appropriately planned for. We need to protect our natural resources, and communities need transparent information so they can be engaged throughout the process. When done right, data centers can support creation of high-quality jobs, strengthen communities, drive private investment, and enhance Michigan's economic competitiveness now and in the future. Michigan has a real opportunity not just to attract investment, but to be a national leader in how data centers are developed. That means clear, transparent expectations grounded in facts that ensure that these projects deliver real benefits in the communities where they're located. Michigan for Responsible Data Centers Coalition is here to elevate facts, support constructive dialogue, and ensure that local leaders and residents have the information they need to make decisions. Thank you again for being here, for covering this press conference, And Josh, I'll turn it back over to you. I think we'll probably have question and answer. You're on mute, Josh.
There we go. We do have a few questions. I'm going to go through the Q&A. The first one is related to energy, and we do have representatives from consumers and DTE who are listening in on the call. I'm going to ask them to jump in on this first question, which states that several speakers have mentioned the skepticism around electric bills inflating from data center development and noted that, on the contrary, there are potential for bills to actually go down. The dominant line of thinking is that data centers will mean utilities have to invest in building out grids in order to power the centers and then raise prices to consumers in order to cover the capital expenditures. How would you explain to your average skeptic the mechanics of how data center development can actually lead to lower bills? Lauren Snyder with DTE, with consumers, I'll let you jump in first.
Hi. Hey, thanks. Great question. My name is Lauren Snyder. I'm the Senior Vice President, Chief Customer and Growth Officer at Consumers Energy. And let me tell you why rates will come down when we have data centers here. At Consumers Energy, we have a tariff in place, and there are provisions within that tariff that have been approved by the Michigan Public Service Commission that require large load customers like data centers to pay for the incremental supply and distribution necessary to serve them. So they have to pay our industrial rate, and then they have to pay additional to cover the costs of what might be needed to serve them. And we have to be able to show that in what we file with the commission. So these data centers are going to pay a higher rate, and they're going to pay for the energy and supply to serve them. Also, because of the load that comes on, they are going to help cover fixed costs across the entire system. So that is another way that rates will come down. More load helps reduce overall fixed costs for all of our customers. So these data centers are paying their fair share. There's other requirements in this tariff that also protect our customers. This tariff has the strongest customer protections in the nation, right here at Consumers Energy in Michigan. There will be take and pay clauses so that, in the 15-year required contract that we have with them, in the event anything changes, they are on the hook to pay for their fair share so that no costs go to customers. They have to pay a minimum demand, whether they use that amount or not. So we have great protections in place, but the bottom line is they pay for the incremental supply and distribution necessary to serve them. They pay for their fair share. That's how we can confidently say, by having these customers on our system, rates will go down.
I would echo. I'm Yvette Johnson, Vice President of Electric Sales and Marketing for DTE Energy. And I would echo Lauren's sentiment. We have a tariff as well that was filed just yesterday, a large load tariff, which is a mechanism for customers to pay for all infrastructure costs that have been built on their behalf. So we have those protections installed as well to protect our existing customers from carrying any of the costs associated with these new data centers.
Great, thank you. I'm going to stick on the energy topic for another question. We have one that says, right now the grid is overtaxed and struggling to keep up with electricity demand. There's now speculation that new power plants will have to be met to deal with data center electricity demand. It takes years to build new power plants. Can data centers build on-site power plants to help solve this problem, or use solar or wind power to limit their impact on the grid?
I got this one. Lauren Snyder again with Consumers Energy. I would say this. Our grid is not overtaxed. We have enough capacity today to serve customers, and we will in the future. And here's why. We file an integrated resource plan. It's a requirement of the Michigan Public Service Commission. And we just announced that we're going to be filing one here in June. And what we do is we take a look at the anticipated demand that we expect to have on our system. And we then match up the required supply to serve that demand. It's a whole mix of different supply. And in Michigan, we have a clean energy law that requires us to make sure that we've got a clean mix of renewables and clean. And so we file that so that we can demonstrate that we have the necessary supply needed to meet that demand. That's the business that we've been in for 140 years. That's just what we do. Here's another important point. These data centers don't come on immediately. Many of these data centers start to break ground in like 2029, 2030 timeframe. It's not happening tomorrow. And then there's a ramp. So you hear these big load amounts, there's a ramp to that takes a few years to get to, which aligns perfectly with the way that we plan to accommodate load on our system. We have capacity today. Our grid is not overtaxed today. We have an integrated resource plan that ensures that we can prove to you and to our regulator that we can serve the anticipated load on our system.
Again,
Anything you'd like to add?
yeah, I'm going to probably be echoing Lauren's sentiments all day, but we have the capacity to serve the 2 data center contracts that we have in place. We have the capacity today.
Great, thank you. I'm going to jump into ARPAN's question. Does the coalition plan on working with townships, particularly smaller ones that feel overwhelmed by some of the requests from developers to build in their communities? Randy, I think you have some requests locally in your area of the state, and I'd like to ask you to jump in on how you're helping.
Yeah, and I think how this coalition can help too. There's certainly some data center projects that are circling Greater Grand Rapids that have caused some area townships to be sort of the tip of the spear in terms of how to respond and go through the process that we're describing here. And they're following many of the sort of guidelines that I described earlier. They're contemplating special use permits. They're contemplating rezoning with conditions. They're listening very carefully to the concerns of the public and finding ways to address them within their ordinances, and ultimately then coming forth with development agreements as well. So I think learning on some of the experiences of communities that have gone quickly, I think learning from other communities across the country who have become sort of data center communities for decades, and learn from their experience, and to Jim's earlier point, do it right, do data centers right, do it responsibly, and accrue the benefits while addressing the concerns. So I think what we've heard from the communities are that they're looking for resources like this, like what will be developed and deployed by this coalition, that provides access to best practices, model ordinances, and how do you communicate with the public in a proper way. So we'll provide that sort of education to those communities that are looking at data center projects.
All right. We have another question here. We're talking about, we got a question about indirect jobs and the development of data centers. Tyler, do you mind answering what do you make around the criticism of the lack of permanent jobs after the construction phase when we're using data centers as an economic development tool?
From my perspective, I totally reject the idea that a data center does not provide long-term direct or indirect jobs or enough. In Michigan, we have the privilege of being very heavy in automotive manufacturing. And so we've heard announcements over the years that were thousands or tens of thousands of jobs, and that has affected our perspective. But in recent years, we've also heard announcements where those jobs are going to other states. And it's because we weren't shovel ready for that development. And so from my perspective, I want us to be shovel ready for this development. And I don't want to have the public discourse reject these opportunities for the wrong reasons. In Michigan, we're over 90% employed by small businesses. Nationwide, it's like 99-point-something%. Small businesses truly are the backbone of our economy. A data center that has 12 net new employees, even if it's actually a few dozen people working there every single day, if we say just 12 are net new, at the type of skill level and compensation level of these workers, that's $1 million in payroll in your local community. That's $1 million in households that would not have been there otherwise. And of course, some of that is spent sent up in taxes, consumed. But that's a really significant difference. I think about all the work I get to do with our R1 universities, and will my kids and grandkids be able to keep a job long term in our peninsula? Are we growing in tomorrow's economy? And these are the types of industry and innovation sectors that we really need to support to make sure we're doing that.
Awesome. And Jim, I see your hand is raised. You're muted. Jim, you're muted.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I think it's important when we talk about job projections, it's not just at the construction of the site. As Tyler said, and as we said throughout this press conference, this is the backbone of our future commerce here in Michigan. This hopefully will provide the infrastructure, just like a good road or sewers and things of that nature, that you need to attract new businesses that create their own jobs. Hopefully, this is just providing the foundation so Michigan can grow because we're more economically competitive. But to do that, we need to have this infrastructure if we really want to be here for the jobs of the today and the careers of tomorrow.
Absolutely. So we got another question. We've talked a lot today about the environmental framework behind these developments. Jeff, what do you make of worries from environmental groups around clean energy standards and the state tax credit for data centers, particularly between utilities and data centers?
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question. Each project is, from an environmental standpoint, is addressed, weighed, looked at from permitting and compliance on its own. And without having the details on any particular project, I can't opine on any one project. But these data centers and their systems for reducing water use and reducing non-contact water to ensure that wastewater is not being discharged into local streams. That's real, and there are rules and there are incentives and there are programs to support that. And then the environmental agencies, when they look at all of that. They look at how much water. They have an entire online tool that they look at how much groundwater and how much water is being used across various industries. They have it down to the region, they have it down to the city, they have it down to the local community. So they look at how much water is being pulled out of any given aquifer. Of course, your municipal water systems, they know how much water is being used. And then the environmental regulators also look at discharge of water, and they require sampling of water, and they put parameters on that water to make sure that there are not contaminants that are going to be unhealthy to both the environment and to public health. And as I mentioned, there are tax incentives within the Michigan legislation that encourages the use of that. And you're seeing more and more data centers go through a program of water conservation. Twofold, right? It's both environmentally better, but it's also less costly when you're using less water.
So I know you touched, and Jeff, I'm just going to follow up with you here. I know you touched a lot on water there. In terms of water usage or like water conservation, can you speak just a little bit more about water conservation and how it relates to data centers?
Yeah, I mean, it's
I think there's a lot of misinformation around that.
Yeah, there is a lot of misinformation. The amount of water that a data center uses really does pale in comparison to a lot of large industrial manufacturers in the water that they're using. So there's certainly concern over the water use, but again, it's if you look across the spectrum of manufacturing facilities, industrial facilities, agricultural facilities that are using water, the data centers really are a fraction of that water use. And again, it's also becomes an economic and financial impact for them to have water conservation and to assure that they're not overusing water, that they're not using it wastefully. And really the water that's being used is strictly non-contact cooling, right? It's just to cool the systems within the building for where the servers are, right? It's not coming into contact with anything. And so from a water conservation perspective, it really is limiting the amount of water that they use and using systems that, quite frankly, aren't just using water, right? They're using other systems for cooling. So again, it's an environmental issue. It's an economic issue for them to institute water conservation practices. I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you. So this one I'm going to go back to Jim, but please, if anyone else wants to chime in, feel free. We received a question around misinformation, talking really specifically about the project that we've heard about in the news in Mason, but really talking about how protesters and opposition, we hear that those groups cite sources and factual information, and consumers don't really know what is true and what they can believe. How can we know what is a realistic and factual resource? And how do we get our truthful information around data centers?
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate the question. I sympathize with it. Oftentimes, it can be hard to kind of ferret through all the information that's coming at you, especially if you're getting it in snippets or online. I think what I've noticed and what I'm coming to find in a lot of this debate is a lot of the information that's out there is either dated information or it's coming from states that have different processes, protections, and what happens in their state. And that's why, like the work that Tyler's doing, the work that we're commissioned through PSC, why that's so important. What this whole coalition wants to do is say, put the data on the table, bring it forward, and really do the deep dive and give people the resources so they can look at it, make a decision for themselves. Our goal is to have credible resources, to have subject matter experts, non-politicized, to say, here's the information, and then people are going to have to spend some time and look at it. Some of this, you just can't accept everything in a 10 or 15-second soundbite. You actually have to read through and you have to figure out if that's a verified, trusted resource or not, which I think this coalition can be very helpful in making sure it can happen for everyone across the state as we look at this important topic.
Tyler, do you have any thoughts there?
Sure, thank you. I'd be glad to add to that. So in Michigan, for better or for worse, we're thought of as a very highly regulated state, right? In the business community, we struggle with that a little bit. But when it comes to new development or protecting our precious resources, it's really a boon for us. When you hear stories about, what's gone on in Virginia or Georgia, it's a completely different regulatory environment. At the time we completed our analysis, there were 19 publicly announced and proposed data centers. We won't win all of those, and some of them won't meet our bar for what we want in a good neighbor. But we need some of them, certainly. And we're fortunate that we'll only be able to take the ones who meet all of the regulatory burdens that we have here. And if you have further questions, I had the pleasure of speaking with the drain commissioner in Genesee County last night. He is on top of this. He understands exactly how much water is going in and out, how much capacity they have for data centers, how it will be cooled underground as it travels back to Saginaw Bay. Most drain commissioners around the state are probably in the same position where they've done the research and they've figured it out. So I would just encourage folks to reject information you're given if it doesn't have good data sources and citations, and to do further reading, get to the bottom of the things you're curious about.
Randy, I see that your hand is raised.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of generic data center information, and I think both Jim and Tyler are on point. It has to be modern. These things have evolved over time. They've become more efficient on energy, more efficient on water. I think we also need to recognize the project-specific data. So when a particular data center is approaching a community, it's their application, it's their site plan, it's the agreements that I referenced earlier that are going to articulate what is their water use, what's their noise level, what's their light levels. And until they make those formal applications, it's all speculation. And I think we're seeing a lot of people sort of transfer past older data center models from across the country and transfer that onto these new proposals without really having those facts and figures. One of the challenges that we need to help communities address is, in a typical project, you have a rezoning, let's say in March. and let's say it gets passed, generally 6 to 9 months later, a company will come back with their more formal site plan that will have the detailed design that will know more precisely what their water use will be or what their light will be or what their noise will be. The public wants all of that at once. And so it's taking a little bit of a lag, a little bit of a delay, but I would say it's important for the community leaders that are taking these votes, and it's really important for the broader public to distinguish what is sort of general data center data information across the country, and then what is the project specific data. And it might take a minute to get those detailed designs information for the public.
So this next one is for Yvette or for Lauren. There was a follow-up question around that just says, are you saying that data centers pay for 100% of the infrastructure cost for their power usage? And are there incentives available or offered by consumers and DTE along with the state?
Correct. They pay 100% of the infrastructure cost supply needed to power them. No, we do not receive incentives. We have an obligation to serve, and we look forward to serving these data centers.
And that's exactly right for DTE as well. Customers pay 100% for generation, transmission, distribution, any bit of infrastructure that needs to be built on their behalf. They pay 100% of that cost, and we have no incentives.
Just to drive that point home, do either of your companies choose the programs that you support, or when they were brought to you, that is, you move forward with those as they're brought to you?
We have an obligation to serve. And so when customers are interested, we love growth opportunities. We haven't seen opportunities like this, not only with data centers, but manufacturing. And I couldn't even tell you when. And so it's an exciting time. And so for these large load customers, as I've mentioned before, we have tariff provisions that articulate what is required for these contracts to move forward. So after we reach an agreement with a data center, we file that contract with the Michigan Public Service Commission. So there's an extra level of accountability there, and then they approve. And so you can rest assured that these customers pay their fair share. We have enough energy supply, and there is a highly regulated process to ensure that there are proper customer protections in place for our customers in Michigan.
Yeah, same here. We're excited about the data center growth that's coming to the Michigan economic area. And we have a duty to serve, so we can't be biased as to what the business is. We have an obligation to serve, and that's what we do.
So
I just want to reiterate this, like, we're saying this is like growth is good for Michigan, right? I hope that's a big key takeaway from this. Yeah. Like, there is such goodness that comes from growth for the state of Michigan. And we are a part of helping make that happen.
So do data centers raise or lower property values for surrounding communities?
So I'll jump in and others can please chime in. So a couple of data points, and I don't have the study with me, but the National Realtors Association or something like that, we'll get the report, did an analysis, and the opening sentence of the opening paragraph was, this came out differently than we expected. Data center communities that have this kind of tax base infused into those communities see increased valuations of their properties because you suddenly see more infrastructure investment, you see investment in parks, you see investment in schools. They tend to be very high quality, attractive places. The community outside of Omaha that I referenced earlier went from having one of the poorest school districts to one of the wealthiest school districts, in serious decline to now serious growth. They've built new elementary school, they built new high school, they built a new community center, they built new infrastructure, and now it's one of the fastest growing markets in the Plains States. So it can have a profoundly positive impact on the communities that it serves.
I would add to that, we've had the opportunity to do several analyses for National Association of Realtors and other entities related to what did a new development do to home values in the area. Particularly, we had one related to wind that went all the way through litigation. And, none of our projects have been the groundbreaking ones like what Randy talked about, where you see there was almost no activity there, and then you get all the growth. But what we've seen is normal growth in real estate values along, a trajectory line of peer regions.
So, this next question I think it's going to be best answered by Jim, but please anyone else chime in. The question is, some residents that I've talked to in mid-Michigan feel as though cities and townships should draft ordinances that make it so a data center can't come into a community. What are your thoughts there?
I guess I would want to know why they think that. If you're going to your local government, you're saying, please stop job creation, please stop infrastructure improvement. What's the rationale behind that? And I think those are the type of conversations that hopefully will be generating people can have. You can have somebody who makes an emotional statement, and maybe their belief is based on misinformation, old information, or fear. If we have an open debate and an open dialogue, hopefully policymakers will make the best decision for their communities. But it's hard to know why someone would want to say, please don't let my community grow.
And Craig, along that line, I think that is tied to job creation and development. Do you have any thoughts around like moratoriums and job development in Michigan?
Well, absolutely. It's confusing me, the negativity a lot of times, because let's face it, there are a lot of young people looking to get into trades. There are a lot of people out there in general looking for good, high-paying technical type jobs. And these data centers are going to be huge and bring a lot of hours of labor into the areas. And we also talked earlier about permanent jobs once the data centers are complete and running. Those are highly technical jobs. They're going to have maintenance people. They're going to have technicians that have to be on site. So really the growth for the local economy, the opportunities for both young and mature people to take on really good, high-paying jobs with good benefits. I mean, it's just a total benefit to the community, from the economy to job creation. There's just so many opportunities here that I really love getting on coalitions like this, because we want to get factual data out there so that people can actually see the positives that these data centers can bring to local communities.
Randy, I saw that you
I
muted
think,
as well.
Katie, I think the question is why this coalition is so important, and I think how we can be helpful to the elected officials and the planning commissions across the state of Michigan, where somebody in the public may say, we just don't want whatever X. That's not how our zoning is structured. We can't have exclusionary zoning. Communities can't say, I want Craig's project, but not Tyler's. We can't be exclusionary in that way. We can be thoughtful. We can be proactive. We can think about the context of the community in terms of where we place a food processing company, a McDonald's, a gas station, a data center. But you can't be exclusionary by law. And so planning commissioners, township and city council members, they are under tremendous pressure, but they know that they have to find ways to plan properly for this kind of use. So as they go about their ordinance, rewriting there's not really an ability to say absolutely not. It's really what's the context that makes the best sense in our community.
Well,
elected officials in my municipality were saying they were going to put a moratorium on something. I would question them as to why they were telling me they weren't going to do their job. Their job is to consider these opportunities and to ask the hard questions and to get the detailed information. And if a project isn't the right fit, but all the work's been done to figure it out, fair enough. But why pass up the opportunity?
So this next question, I'm going to start with Randy. Can you talk a little bit about the placement of data centers? There's concern about farmland being consumed rather than placing these in urban areas that might be better suited for industry development. What thoughts do you have about that?
Yeah, so there's different scales of data centers. There's the smaller co-location data centers that are sort of, if Michigan has 70, probably 65 of them would be in that classification, much smaller, 5 to 10 acre piece of real estate needed to accommodate their use. And they can be placed just about anywhere. You have this middle market of data centers, which we have one in Grand Rapids. I think it's the largest in the state. It's a company called Switch, and they occupy about 75 acres. And they can generally locate on the edge of town. Not very often do you find a 75 acre site within let's say the city of Detroit or the city of Flint or even the city of Grand Rapids. And then the third category of data centers broadly is hyperscale, and that's the Microsofts, the Googles. Sorry. Sorry, I had a call come in. And at that scale, now you're talking hundreds of acres to accommodate the size and scope of those facilities that you see across the country, but haven't historically seen in Michigan. And that generally does take you to the edges of an urbanized area. And so when a data center is looking for a location, they start by looking for the power capacity. They look at the 345 kV lines across the state of Michigan. They look for real estate that is along those corridors that could make sense. And they look for areas that are near freeways, limited exposure to nearby housing, but proximity to water and sewer services as well. And so those factors, power capacity and availability, water and sewer capacity and availability, sizable piece of property near freeway, that drives their location decisions. And given the size of the acreage, it does tend to be farmland. But in the case of the projects that I've seen to date, these are corridors of development. So it may be farming today, but it's along a freeway with infrastructure. It's generally been planned or anticipated to be developed over time.
All right. So that is wonderful. I really appreciate that. At this point, we are wrapping up. We're at time. So this has been recorded and we're going to be able to share that recording. And any of your questions that we haven't gotten to, we'll be able to address, but it's our hope for any media on the call that we can help and serve as a reference point. Josh, do you want to jump in with any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we'll be sending out a press release about the coalition and a link to the Zoom recording for anyone who would like it. If you do have additional questions or would like follow-up, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. We will connect you with one of our speakers who can make sure that you get what you need. And we appreciate your time and attention today. Thank you very much. And we will talk to you all soon. Have a great day.